Hello, my name is Xavier PRATS MONNÉ. I'm the Director General for Education and Culture at the European Commission. The European Commission is the executive branch of the European Union. We are based in Brussels, and we work in the field of education with a very clear and limited scope of competence. On the one hand, we have funding programs. Many of you may have heard of the Erasmus program. It's an example of the kind of support we give to students, but also to institutions, to have consortia, to have partnerships, to modernize the way they teach and learn, and to innovate in education. And then we also have policy development, policy cooperation. We have exchange of best practice between institutions and countries. We promote innovation. We try to disseminate the interesting experiments that are being done in the field of education. So these are our tasks in the field of education. Well, online education, I think, is a very good example of what technology, or rather the combination of technology, globalization, and demographic change, what these three factors are doing to education, as they have with other sectors such as banking sector, such as music, communications, the media. They are really transforming the way people teach and learn. So threat or opportunity, well, a bit of both. But certainly what I think is really extraordinary is that with online education, with ICTs, we open entirely new grounds for education. Let me give you an example. I'm from Spain, and most people know that one great contribution from Spain to universal literature is the Don Quixote. Now, Don Quixote was written about 400 years ago. For the first, say, 380 of those 400 years, the access to Don Quixote was determined by just one thing: the number of copies available, hard copies available. If you managed to put your hands on a Don Quixote book, then you could read it and improve your appreciation and love of literature. Now, for the last 10, 20 years, anybody, anytime, anywhere, can read Don Quixote for free. And this is really something that is really extraordinary. And it tells us that the real potential of online education is to reach what seems to be an impossible goal of any education policy, which is to have at the same time more excellence and more equity in education. This is what online education promises. But of course, this is just a promise. And in the meantime, this radical change in the way people teach and learn that online education can bring is something that will create many changes. Changes in business models, changes in the way we understand education, and also a number of threats. Everybody has heard about the threats to privacy that technology brings. But in the field of education, there's actually more than that, because due to technology, in a way, everything is remembered, nothing is forgotten. So we run the risk that let's say a mistake that one makes when one is a student in school follows him or her for the rest of her life. And we risk also depriving people from the possibility of improving themselves, because if nothing is forgotten, then also everything is predicted. So you can do a lot in assuming what people will be able to learn in the future, and yet people should be free to improve. So indeed, I think online education is really an extraordinary opportunity, but an opportunity that will have to be handled and managed rather than just suffered as something coming from heaven. Well, online education has to be a top priority for us because, as I just said, we really believe that it has really a transforming power for education. And we must make sure that we use it to the best, and that we give the tools to individuals, to institutions, to national governments to make the best out of online education. So it certainly is a priority, because also it's an area where change is extremely quick, where few people know where we will be in just a few years' time. So understanding what happens, making sure that the good experiences and the new findings are shared is really very important. And this is perhaps our core, most important task, to find out what works, in this case in online education, and scale it up and make sure that most people, as many people as possible, as many institutions as possible, benefit from it. So for us at the European Commission, online education and the potential and the impact of technology on education, on the way people teach and learn, is certainly going to be a top priority for the next years, as, by the way, is and should be a priority for any education institution that is looking at the future with confidence and with realism. Well, I think that education has a great future for a very simple reason. We need to know much more of the very complex world in which we're living. We need to know more about our relationship with the world and our relation between ourselves. So the need for knowledge in our societies can only increase. The need for education can only increase. It's just that it will not be education as we know it. And indeed, technology, globalization, and also demographic change, meaning the balance of the distribution of talent in the world, are changing really dramatically. So indeed, online education will change education as we know it, but it will give more possibilities for better education for more people. This is, for me, the essence of what online education can do. What it does is transform the business model of education and even actually the physical distribution of current universities. You already see, for example, in some universities, for example, in Australia, where they are realizing that the current distribution of the actual buildings and meeting rooms of a university is organized around essentially big auditoria to have big master classes. Well, what students need more and more is not so much big master classes with 400 people sitting in a room, because then you can have actually 10,000 people listening on a computer. But what people need is many more spaces for cooperation, to exchange, to understand. This is what a university is for more and more. And this is to a great extent due to the change that online education is creating, to the opportunities that technology is bringing to education. Another example is the traditional roles of teachers, of professors. Essentially, a professor has been, ever since schools were invented, as we know them today by Frederick the Great 250 years ago, schools were a place where people received information and they took it home to digest it. Well, what we see because of technology is that things are actually being inverted. The place where people gather information, because it's so easy, is maybe at home, maybe in other parts, not in classrooms. And what people do in classrooms is try to understand, with the help of a professor and with the help of their peers, try to understand the very complexity of knowledge today. This is, I think, the type of changes that technology brings, not to end education, but to change the way we see education. Let me give you yet another example. What online education does is to open assessment of education more than before, and to give, maybe for the first time again since schools exist, to give students a powerful tool to change education. Because students now know more what a good education is, what a good teacher can be, and therefore they have a better idea of what they should get. So there will be a deep incentive for change, not least because it is a young generation that knows how to use technology and who actually live with technology every day. So I think that indeed online education and more generally technology will transform education as we know it. And it is for us collectively to grasp the opportunities of what these mean and to make it into an extraordinary development of our societies that will need knowledge much more today than they ever needed it in the past.